Introduction of the protagonist. Sarah Malik had always been a dreamer, the kind of girl who saw the world through the soft glow of fairy lights and romantic novels. At 26, she lived in a quiet suburb with her parents, the youngest of three sisters and the only one still unmarried. While she had a degree in literature and worked part-time at a local bookstore, her real passion was writing, stories filled with love, mystery, and happy endings. Ironically, her own love life had been less than ideal, a mix of hesitant crushes and near relationships that never quite bloomed. Despite her calm demeanor, Sarah was beginning to feel the weight of expectations pressing in on her. Her parents, though loving, reminded her gently and often that time was ticking. "You're not getting any younger," her mother would say, half-jokingly over morning tea. "We just want to see you settled," her father added, a hint of concern in his voice. But it wasn't just them. The community she belonged to thrived on tradition and timelines, especially when it came to marriage. Friends she had grown up with were already raising families. Cousins her age had their wedding photos proudly displayed on social media, smiling beside husbands chosen through careful arrangements and introductions. Sarah, on the other hand, still believed in meeting someone naturally, someone who would understand her soul and love her not for her looks or status, but for the way she saw the world. Yet, reality had started to dim that dream. She tried to appear unaffected, brushing off questions at family gatherings with a polite smile, but inside, anxiety bloomed like a creeping vine. Was she being unrealistic? Was she holding out for a kind of love that didn't exist in the real world? The questions haunted her at night when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, the pages of her half-finished novel resting on her bedside table. Then came the proposal. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't even someone she had known long. But Daniel Kahn, a distant acquaintance of the family, appeared almost like an answer to unspoken prayers. He was respectful, well-spoken, and confident. He had recently returned from abroad, had a stable job, and carried himself with an air of mystery that intrigued Sarah more than she wanted to admit. Most importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in her. Her parents were thrilled. Friends said she was lucky. Even Sarah, cautious as she was, couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe love could come after marriage. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Daniel wasn't just a stranger in name. He was a stranger in every possible sense. And the journey Sarah was about to begin wouldn't just challenge her dreams, but her very understanding of trust, identity, and survival. The proposal. Daniel Kahn entered Sarah's life like an unexpected storm, calm on the surface but swirling with mystery underneath. It began with a phone call from her aunt, in Lahore. "There's a boy I think you should meet," she said, her voice light but insistent. "He's just returned from London, very polished, comes from a good family, smart too. He saw your photo and asked to meet you." Sarah's heart sank with familiar hesitation. She had heard this line before, dozens of times in fact, yet something in her aunt's tone, an urgency that hadn't been there before, gave her pause. The meeting was set at a quiet cafe 2 days later. Sarah wore a modest navy blue dress, her long hair tied back in a loose braid. She told herself not to expect anything, maybe just be polite, hear him out, and go home. But when Daniel walked in, everything shifted. He was taller than she imagined, dressed in a crisp white shirt and blazer. His features were sharp, his smile confident without arrogance. He introduced himself with ease, taking the lead in conversation, but never dominating it. His accent held a faint British lilt, and he spoke of his life abroad, working in tech, traveling often, staying grounded despite success. Most surprising of all, he seemed interested in her. He asked about her writing, her dreams, even quoted a line from a book she mentioned. By the end of the hour, she was intrigued, against her better judgment. The next few meetings happened fast. Too fast, some might have said. He didn't flirt in the traditional sense. He was direct, grounded, but he had a way of making her feel like she mattered, like her voice was being heard in a world that often dismissed soft-spoken girls like her. Then, barely 2 weeks after their first meeting, he proposed. They were sitting in his car after dinner. Rain tapped gently on the windshield. The city lights blurred behind droplets as Daniel turned to her with calm certainty. "I know this is sudden," he said, "but I'm not here to waste your time. I know what I want. And I want this. I want you. I'd like to speak to your parents this week." Sarah blinked. "But we've barely—" "I understand, but life doesn't always wait. I have to return to London soon, maybe within the month. If we're going to build something, we need to start now. I don't believe in dragging things out." It felt like a dream. One part of her, the practical, cautious part, shouted warnings. Too fast, too perfect, too unknown. But another part, the romantic, weary part of her heart, longed to believe this could be the real thing. Maybe this was how it happened for some people. Quickly, decisively, without all the complications. So she said yes, and that was the beginning of everything unraveling. Family influence. If Sarah had been hoping for her family to slow things down, she was sorely mistaken. The moment Daniel formally visited their home, the atmosphere shifted from cautious interest to open celebration. Her parents were instantly charmed. He arrived with flowers for her mother, brought thoughtful gifts from London, and spoke with such grace and respect that it was hard not to be won over. Her father, a normally reserved man, laughed more in that one evening than he had in weeks. "He's sharp," her father said afterward, pouring tea for himself with a pleased expression. "Knows where he's going in life. You don't meet men like that every day." "And the way he spoke about you," her mother added, eyes glowing. "So respectful, so proud. He's clearly serious. You're lucky, Sarah." Lucky. That word lingered. Sarah watched as Daniel wove himself effortlessly into their lives. In just days, he had memorized the names of her cousins, shared jokes with her siblings, and helped her father fix a Wi-Fi issue that had stumped them for weeks. To her family, he was everything they had hoped for, and more. But inside, Sarah felt something she couldn't quite name. A tightness in her chest, like a violin string pulled just a bit too taut. His charm, while impressive, felt rehearsed. His answers always perfect. His past, while full of impressive accomplishments, was oddly vague. She had asked once about his time in London, what neighborhood he lived in, what his friends were like, but his reply had been smooth and general, and then he had steered the conversation away. Still, every time she voiced even a flicker of doubt, her family brushed it aside. "You're overthinking it," her mother would say, patting her hand. "We all have nerves before big decisions." Her older sister, happily married with 2 children, had rolled her eyes affectionately. "You've always been the emotional one, but this isn't a romance novel. It's real life, and Daniel is a good match." Even her best friend, Alina, who had always been her sounding board, was cautiously optimistic. "I get it. It's fast. But sometimes things just fall into place. Don't self-sabotage because it doesn't look exactly how you imagined." Surrounded by reassurances, Sarah began to wonder if maybe the problem was her. Maybe she was too afraid. Maybe love wasn't always fireworks and poetry. Maybe this was how real life worked. Practical choices, strong partnerships, and trust built over time. So, despite the gnawing questions that crept into her mind late at night, she went along with the preparations. The engagement was announced. Dates were discussed, and Sarah smiled in photos, even as something deep within her whispered, "This feels too perfect to be real." But no one was listening, not even her. The whirlwind wedding. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. A whirlwind of fabric, guest lists, and henna-stained hands. Once the families agreed on a date, everything moved at lightning speed. The wedding was scheduled for just 6 weeks after Daniel's proposal, a decision made with little resistance and even less questioning. "It's better this way," her mother said, eyes sparkling as she examined embroidered lehenga swatches. No time for nazar or unnecessary delays. Vendors were booked, invitations sent out, and relatives called in from cities near and far. Sarah felt like she was watching her own life from the outside, a guest at her own celebration. She floated from appointment to appointment, dress fittings, jewelry shopping, makeup trials, nodding at the right times, smiling when she was supposed to, but rarely feeling present. There was no time to pause, to reflect, to ask. The few questions she did raise about Daniel's family, who seemed curiously absent, or his vague responses about his life in London, were met with deflection or distraction. "My parents live abroad and won't be able to come," Daniel had said with a calm smile when asked why they weren't attending. "Health reasons. They're elderly and not fit to travel, but they send their blessings." Her parents accepted this without a blink. "Poor things," her mother said. "Let's include their names on the invitation, of course." As for his friends, "Most of them are back in the UK," he explained. "And I prefer to keep the wedding simple, intimate." Sarah tried to convince herself it made sense. Not everyone had a large circle. Maybe he was just private. Maybe it was all fine. But on the night of the Mendi, as the music thumped through the garden and laughter filled the air, Sarah sat alone for a moment, watching the fairy lights dance across the sky. Something in her heart tightened. She looked down at her decorated hands, the intricate henna patterns winding around her fingers, the small D someone had playfully hidden in the design, and felt a strange sense of disconnection. Like this wasn't her story at all, but a character she was playing in someone else's tale. Still, when the wedding day arrived, she walked down the aisle with her head held high. The ceremony was beautiful, a dreamy affair of gold and white, soft music, and smiling faces. Daniel stood waiting in his sherwani, perfectly composed, his eyes warm and fixed on her. They exchanged vows, signed papers, smiled for cameras. It was official. She was married. And yet, even as the celebrations erupted around her, Sarah felt a flicker of unease in her chest. As though the curtain had dropped too soon, and the stage was set for a play she didn't fully understand. No one had asked enough questions, not even her. First signs of mystery. The first few days after the wedding were quiet, almost too quiet. Sarah moved into a modest but stylish apartment on the edge of the city, one that Daniel had claimed was temporary until they relocated to London. It was fully furnished, spotless, and impersonal. No photos, no clutter, no warmth. She told herself it was a bachelor's space, efficient, minimal. Still, it felt more like a hotel than a home. At first, she chalked it up to adjustment. Daniel was attentive when he was present, polite and warm, but something about him remained just out of reach. He rarely shared stories about his day. He never spoke of friends or co-workers. And most nights, he received phone calls at odd hours. Calls he would take in another room, voice low, door shut firmly behind him. Once, in the middle of the night, Sarah had woken to find him pacing the living room, speaking quickly in hushed tones. When he saw her, he ended the call and smiled. "Just work," he said. "Time zones." She wanted to believe him, but the excuses were always vague. Then there were the locked drawers. One morning, while tidying up, Sarah noticed that the desk in the guest room had a drawer that wouldn't open. She tugged gently, locked. The second drawer was the same. Later that evening, she casually asked him about it. "Oh, those?" he replied, not missing a beat. "Just some personal documents and work stuff. Nothing important." He smiled, kissed her on the forehead, and changed the subject. Another time she found a key, a small silver one, tucked behind a book on the shelf. Curious, she tried it on the drawers. It didn't fit. But when she asked Daniel about it, his reaction startled her. He froze for a moment, then laughed a little too loudly. "Old key," he said. "Probably from a previous tenant or an old cabinet. Don't worry about it." It was the first time she noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His absences, too, became harder to ignore. He would leave early in the morning without explanation, return late, and sometimes disappear for full days. When she asked where he had been, he always had a reason: meetings, errands, surprise visits to lawyers or consulates regarding their move to the UK. Oddly, there were no emails, no paperwork, no flight bookings, just words. And Sarah, who had once convinced herself that love could come after marriage, began to feel the first sharp edges of doubt. She tried to talk to him one night, gently, cautiously. "I just feel like I don't really know what your life looks like outside this apartment." Daniel's smile returned, soft, practiced, unbothered. "You will," he said. "Just trust me. Some things take time." But in the weeks that followed, time only deepened the distance, and the shadows around Daniel grew longer. Digging deeper, Sarah had always trusted her instincts, quiet, steady things that rarely led her wrong. But in recent weeks, that inner voice had grown louder, more urgent. And despite her efforts to ignore it, something inside her refused to rest. It began with the small things. Daniel had once mentioned attending university in Manchester, claiming to have graduated in computer science. But when Sarah casually brought it up during a call with her cousin studying in the UK, something didn't add up. "What was the name of the program again?" her cousin asked. Sarah paused. Daniel had never specified. Just Manchester and tech. No degree certificate, no photos, no old classmates, no social media profiles connected to any university groups. Then there was the passport. One afternoon, while cleaning the wardrobe, Sarah found his travel pouch tucked behind a stack of scarves. Inside were old boarding passes, a few bank slips, and, strangely, 2 passports. One had his name, Daniel Kahn. The other bore a different surname entirely, Daniel Karam. She froze. Both had his photo, but the details varied. Place of birth, even the birth date, by a few years. Her hands trembled as she put everything back, heart thudding in her chest. She didn't confront him right away. Instead, she waited, watched. And what she saw began to chip away at the illusion of her marriage. He received frequent money transfers through apps she didn't recognize. He kept his phone locked at all times, even during sleep, and would grow tense if she was near it. When a parcel arrived addressed to a name she didn't recognize, Daniel brushed it off as an old alias from abroad. He never introduced her to any friends, never mentioned colleagues. Whenever she asked about their move to London, he was vague. "Just a bit more paperwork. There are delays. Next month, maybe." So she began her own search. Late at night, once he was asleep, she scrolled through every clue she could gather. She checked both names online. Daniel Kahn turned up little more than generic profiles, one LinkedIn page that hadn't been updated in years. But Daniel Karam was different. A few obscure news results appeared, mostly in regional outlets. The stories were scattered, lacking full details, but one headline chilled her. "Suspected fraudster linked to tech scam in Dubai, still at large." The photo attached was grainy, but it was him. Sarah stared at the screen for a long time, her breath shallow, her mind racing. The man she had married wasn't just a stranger. He was a lie wrapped in charm and sealed with promises. And now, she was trapped in a life she didn't recognize, beside someone who had never truly been who he claimed to be. Shocking discovery. The truth revealed itself in fragments, pieces of a puzzle Sarah never knew she was meant to solve. It started with an old email. One night, determined to find something concrete, she guessed the password to Daniel's old laptop, an outdated device he never used anymore but kept tucked away in the study. It took 3 tries. The fourth, her own name, Sarah, 21, unlocked the screen. What she found turned her blood cold. Multiple email accounts, conversations in languages she didn't speak, attachments with scanned IDs, none of them his, messages about clients, urgent payments, wire transfers, fake resumes. Her breath caught as she opened one PDF. It was a marriage certificate, not theirs, a different name, a different woman, and a date that proved it predated their own wedding by more than a year. Sarah reeled. She searched the woman's name, Zara Fawad, and discovered her social media profile. Private, but active. A few public photos showed her smiling next to a man with his arm around her waist. It was him, Daniel, or Daniel, or whatever his name truly was. The caption on one read, "1 year with my world. Thank you for being my husband and my home." Sarah's hand went to her chest. It wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just lies. He was already married. Her mind raced as she began to piece it all together. the secretive calls, the locked drawers, the vague answers. He had been living two lives, or more. A smooth-talking manipulator with no real job, no real identity, and certainly no plans to take her to London. That was just another fiction, a carrot on a stick. Digging deeper, she traced the phone numbers he had hidden away. One was linked to a business shut down for financial fraud. Another connected him to a reported investment scam in Dubai. Her hands shook as she clicked through archived pages, each confirming what her instincts had warned all along. Daniel Kahn didn't exist. He was a chameleon, adapting names, accents, and backstories as needed. A con artist who preyed on trust, especially that of women like her, hopeful, honest, and surrounded by families eager to believe in fairy tales. Sarah backed away from the laptop, her stomach churning. She wasn't just betrayed, she had been used. And worse, she didn't know how deep the deception went, or how dangerous Daniel could become once he knew she had uncovered the truth. She looked over her shoulder, heart thumping, half expecting him to appear in the doorway. But the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. And for the first time, Sarah realized she wasn't safe. Confrontation and danger. Sarah didn't sleep that night. The apartment, once eerily silent, now felt hostile, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. Her mind replayed every moment, every lie, every carefully rehearsed smile Daniel had given her. And now that the mask had dropped, every gesture seemed menacing in hindsight. By morning, she had made a decision. She had to confront him. Not just for answers, for her own sanity. He returned in the early afternoon, his usual cool demeanor intact. He kissed her on the forehead, complimented her cooking, and casually asked how her day had been. She watched him closely, the laptop hidden beneath a stack of clothes in the bedroom closet. "I need to talk to you," she said, voice calm but flat. Daniel glanced up. "Sure, what's up?" "I found your other marriage certificate," she said plainly. "The one with Zara Fawad. I saw the photos, the emails, the fake IDs. I know everything." For a beat, he didn't react. No denial, no outrage. Then, slowly, Daniel stood, his expression shifting like the changing of weather, from sunny to storm clouds in a matter of seconds. "You were digging through my things?" he asked, voice low. "That's all you have to say?" she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You lied to me. You used me. You're already married. Who even are you?" His eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." Her heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "I want answers, now and then I want out." Daniel let out a slow breath and sat down, his posture relaxed but eyes calculating. "You think you figured it all out, don't you?" he said coolly. "But you have no idea what you're talking about, Zara. That was an arrangement. Nothing more. She knows the deal. And you were never supposed to go through my things. That's your defense? That I violated your privacy?" He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was chilling. "You're acting emotional, irrational. Do you know what people will say if you go to the police? You have no proof of anything illegal. And if you leave me now, do you really think your family will be spared the embarrassment?" Sarah stared at him, shocked at the sudden shift from charming husband to manipulative predator. "Are you threatening me?" she asked quietly. "I'm warning you," he said, leaning closer. "You're my wife. That means we're in this together, whether you like it or not. And if you try to ruin my life, I'll make sure yours goes down with it." There was a pause, heavy, sharp. Something inside Sarah broke in that moment, but something else ignited too. Clarity. She was done being afraid. She stood up, her voice steady. "I'm not your victim, Daniel. Not anymore." His smile faded. His eyes darkened. And Sarah knew then, leaving him wouldn't just be difficult. It would be dangerous. The escape or justice Sarah didn't waste another day. After Daniel's veiled threats, she knew she was no longer dealing with just a liar. She was facing a man capable of anything. Every second spent under the same roof as him was a risk she could no longer afford. She began planning that night. Using the quiet hours when he was out, always working, always vague, Sarah reached out to the one person who had always believed in her gut, Alina. When they met in a small cafe under the pretense of a casual lunch, Sarah slid a flash drive across the table. On it were copies of everything: the emails, fake passports, bank records, and Zara's marriage certificate. Alina listened without interruption, her face hardening with every word. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Today, right now. I know, but I need to do more than just run. He's hurt others, and he will again." Alina made a call, not to the police, but to a private investigator her cousin had once hired during a business fraud case. Within hours, a quiet man named Arif met Sarah in a secure location. He reviewed her evidence and promised to act quickly. "Men like him slip through cracks," he said, "but not if the trap is set right." The next few days were nerve-wracking. Sarah returned home each night pretending everything was fine. She cooked, smiled, played the part of the devoted wife, all while packing small bags and hiding essentials with Alina. Her heart raced every time Daniel looked at her too closely. Finally, Arif called. "We've traced his accounts. He's under investigation now, but we need one more thing: a confession or proof that he's still committing fraud." That opportunity came sooner than expected. Daniel left one of his burner phones unattended for just minutes. In that time, Sarah photographed incriminating messages, one involving a new woman he was setting up to meet, another about moving stolen funds offshore. It was enough. With Arif's help and her evidence in hand, Sarah coordinated with authorities. A sting was arranged. Daniel would be intercepted under the pretense of a routine identity check at a government office. He went, smug and unaware. He never came back. That night, Sarah sat in Alina's living room, wrapped in a blanket, her hands shaking as the news broke. Suspected con artist detained under multiple fraud charges, identities under investigation. They had him. He wasn't just caught, he was unmasked. Sarah wept, not from grief, but from the overwhelming relief of freedom. The lies, the fear, the manipulation, all of it finally behind her. She wasn't a woman who married a stranger anymore. She was a woman who saw the truth, stood her ground, and survived. Aftermath and growth. The days following Daniel's arrest were a blur of emotions: relief, anger, disbelief. Sarah didn't have time to process everything at once. There was too much to do: paperwork, police reports, and the awkward, painful calls to family and friends, explaining the truth. But as each day passed, the weight lifted just a little more. She was free. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself waking up to a silence that was no longer unsettling. At first, she had been afraid of the quiet, the kind of stillness that came with no one to answer to, no one to explain herself to. She had been used to the noise of Daniel's presence, his smooth talk, his manipulation, his lies. Now, it was just her, and in that silence, she began to hear herself again. Her thoughts, her wants, her own voice, all the things that had been drowned out for so long. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, she reflected on everything that had happened. It had all started with a dream, the dream of love, stability, the fairy tale of a life that felt secure. But in chasing that dream, she had almost lost herself. She had given away her trust without question, without hesitation. But she had learned too. She had learned that love didn't mean blind devotion. It didn't mean sacrificing her sense of self. It didn't mean ignoring the voice inside that told her something was wrong. Sarah had been weak in the face of doubt, but she wasn't weak anymore. She had survived. Not just the betrayal, but her own fear. And that had made her stronger. Her life, once defined by uncertainty, was now open to possibilities. Slowly, she began to rebuild, to trust again, but this time with eyes wide open. She signed up for a writing class, something she had always wanted to do but never dared. She reconnected with old friends, built a new network, and surrounded herself with people who respected and loved her for who she truly was, not the image of who someone else wanted her to be. Her family, while embarrassed by the scandal, were also proud of her strength. They saw a different woman in her now, one who had reclaimed her independence, who had faced fear and come out the other side, whole. There were still moments when the weight of the past would return. A face in a crowd, an unfamiliar phone number on her screen, a shadow of doubt. But each time, Sarah reminded herself of how far she had come, and in those moments, she no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw a woman who had learned to trust herself again, who had found strength in the darkness and courage in the silence. She was no longer defined by the lies she had been fed, but by the truth she had fought to uncover. Sarah closed her eyes, the cool breeze brushing her face. The world was full of endless possibilities, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly free.